Welcome to Not Starving Artist, the podcast. I'm your host, Brooke Benson, money coach and equity actor. I am your financial cheerleader, here to help you build your financial confidence and have power over your money. The best part, no budgeting or bi-weekly paychecks required. I went from being a broke BFA grad having weekly panic attacks about money to a financially confident, wealth-building actor and business owner. Money gets to feel fun, simple, and sexy, and I am going to show you how. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. I am so excited to introduce you today to Lauren. Lauren and I worked together back in the summer, and she is a freelancer. I'm going to let her introduce herself. She's an incredible human, and she had such an awesome experience inside of one-on-one coaching, navigating things like credit cards and freelancing and inconsistent income and buying a laptop and then going full-time freelancing and a lot of relationship stuff and family dynamics and money and emotions, impulse purchasing. We're going to cover so much today. So before we start diving into all the money things, Lauren, I would love for you to introduce yourself.
Oh, that's an amazing intro. Thank you. I'm Lauren Kelly. I am a now full-time freelancer, musician. I work in the choral circuit. I sing mostly choral music, based out of the Philadelphia area. I sing primarily with a group called The Crossing that's here, but I do other freelance singing gigs around. I sing a lot of Bach, a lot of early music. I used to work for REI, which I still love and love outdoorsy stuff, hiking, climbing, etc.
Yeah. I love it. So I want to talk first off about your transition from REI to full-time freelancing. So in order to get the grounding for that, tell us a little bit about where you were before you began money coaching. What was your draw to want to work on your money, and what did your life look like during that time?
Totally. So I reached out to you actually when I first started working for REI because it was the first time I found a day job that was flexible enough for me to continue doing my freelance work. And for the first time in my life, I found myself with like a little bit more money than just needing to pay, like just truly bare minimums. I was convinced that I was like the client that Brooke would have had that like the least amount of money possible. I was like the poorest possible client, which she assures me is not true, and that everyone thinks that. But like, truly, it was like, oh, I could stop eating beans for a week. Like maybe I should get money coaching. But no, so before I started, yeah, I found myself with this little bit of new money, and my attitude towards money was really just avoidant, like head in the sand. I didn't want to look at my numbers. She asked me some basic questions about like, do you have a savings account? I don't know. How much interest does your savings make? I like, what does that mean? Do you have a credit card? Of course not. Like, I can't be trusted with a credit card. I didn't know really where my money was going because it stressed me out. And if I looked at the issue directly in the face, that would stress me out. And I didn't have any real financial literacy whatsoever.
Yeah, definitely. So now to ground us in the transition, where are you now? Tell us about your transition to full-time freelancing. Give us some spark notes about some of the things that you learned inside of coaching and implemented that got you to where you are now, and then we'll dive into all the little areas.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference is the awareness. I know how much money I'm making. I know where the money is. I know what that money is going towards. It's not necessarily that I'm making a ton more money than I was. It's more that I know what to do with it and where it's going. My leave from REI they're going through a big transition themselves, and that was something I was actually laid off along with like a third of our store. It was very sad. But it was kind of a nice push for me to say, because I was really scared about my finances, but you taught me how to look at the numbers and how to actually say, oh, like I have saved enough money for me to live without income for 2 months. And because I know that income is coming in the future, I have the tools, like I can handle this. I will be okay. I don't have to run into driving for Uber Eats or whatever it is. Like, so today, like for the past 2 weeks, I have just been home. I'm journaling every day. I am practicing. I'm climbing every day. I'm just like I am resting. I know I have a really busy summer, and never before in my life have I felt the freedom to literally just rest, to say, like, I'm going to take 2 weeks. I'm not going to hustle and push. Like, I'm really just going to recuperate from what was a busy time before and what will be a busy time to come.
I love that so much. That's so incredible, Lauren. And even the people who have money on money on money, millions and millions of dollars, is sometimes don't even have the ability to let themselves rest, right? So it's not just the money in the bank that says you can rest, it's you allowing yourself to be like, I have money in the bank, I can rest. So it's both of those things together. I'd love to know what happened at REI, right? When they did the layoffs. I would love for you to walk through, right? What went on in your head of like, you took us to, okay, I have 2 months of money in the bank to hold me over until the new income starts coming in. But walk me through, like, how did you look at your numbers? What was some of the things that you and I had implemented in our time together that helped you be able to look at your numbers? What were the things you did? And then what were the thoughts that came up? How did you work to give yourself new thoughts to be able to give yourself time? Give us some details.
Totally. The biggest one is I switched over to Ally, as like a lot of Brooke's clients do, because Ally is
This
beautiful.
will be a common thread for
Yes.
all of my client podcast interviews. Everyone's switching to Ally.
And it's great. But what we did was, so I was able to create multiple checking accounts and create a money flow. And the biggest thing was that I created a separate checking account for my rent. And this was originally done because I had like kind of a poopy landlord who I would send him a rent check in the mail and he wouldn't deposit it for like 3-4 months at a time. So I was continually looking at my checkings and doing math of like, okay, how many months has it been since he's deposited a rent check? How many months of rent are in there? And then I'd have to subtract it, like, to even know how much money I could spend. So we just, once a month, I throw my rent money into this checking account. I have checks that come directly from that account, and that's just the easiest flow ever. Since I've moved, I now have a fantastic landlord. I don't need that system because of that issue. But the first thing I did once I was laid off was I looked at that rent checking account and said, I could put 2 months of rent in here today. That's amazing. I've not been able to do that before. Let me do that now. And now I can know exactly what numbers I have to work from. What do I need to do? What other one-off gigs do I have lined up? Um, yeah, and looking at that spread of like, what's in my savings? Do I even need to dip into my savings? And what's actually there? That was my first move was literally like going to the Ally app and like playing around with numbers and seeing where things could go.
Yeah. And I love that the structure that we had set up when your landlord was shitty and like there were just thousands of dollars in your account, and you were like, who knows? It's like a roulette game of when these checks are gonna get pulled. So the fact that that structure that served you during that time, you, right, like in coaching, I'm not just like giving you the checklist of things. I'm showing you how to craft and restructure and move things around so that you did this on your own, where you were like, oh, this structure, how can I now utilize this in a way that serves me now in this period of time, where that checking account then just became the rent checking account for this buffer period of time. I think that's brilliant that your brain is working in that way.
Thank you. I was coached by the best.
So let's talk about now. I know one of the things at the beginning of our time together that was a big focus is, what can I afford? And you alluded to this when you were like, I'm doing math, right? Whenever you were looking at your checking account. And this is the beauty of a money flow. When you split things up, like your non-negotiable bills, your rent, right? For the landlords who still take checks. And then you've got this account that is purely just your flexible spending, which is exactly what you can afford and you can spend, and it's playground money. So let's go back to that time in coaching when we focused on that piece of things. Do you remember what things like clicked for you, epiphanies you had on that in the money flow, the logistics, and also the thoughts when it came to spending money?
Absolutely, because I remember when part of the reason I'm remembering now that I wanted to see you in the first place was now that I had a little bit more money, I felt kind of out of control. I was just like making these impulse buys all the time, especially because I worked at a store filled with stuff that I love. It was hard for me to come home from a day of work without buying something. Um, and I had no idea if I can make this $10 purchase, or like, can I afford $100 fancy shirt, or, whatever it is. Like, what should my budget be, so to speak? Um, but sorry,
Talk about the impulse purchasing versus the intentional joy purchases, because this went along with it, right? You were like, I feel like I can afford these things, but then also sometimes I feel like I can't, like it depends on my mood. And there was a lot of buying that didn't make you feel good. So you were like, I feel like I just need to not be buying these things. And I was like, no, we're going to still buy things. We just need to make sure the things that you're buying are bringing you joy. So the one that I remember very specifically is camping chairs.
yes.
So tell us about the camping chairs. Like, I remember it was the camping chairs, and then there was like an athletic set, like a
Yes.
top and pants set
Oh,
that you were thinking about getting. Tell us about those two.
a perfect example of like two separate things. So the camping chairs, it's the Nemo Stargazers. It's been the old design, and I got a special deal on them because of my job. And I agonized. I was like, am I really going to spend like $200 or so on literally just camping chairs? And this is even though I was about to go on a 3-month trip, like across the country camping, and I would use them all the time. I was still like, these are camping chairs. This is something I could buy at Target for $20. Do I really want to spend this much money on them? And for those, like, I thought about it and thought about it and almost like ruminated, but really just let it sit with time, and eventually got them. I love them. There's actually one set up like behind me. I don't know if you can even see that's the chair, because I put it in the office because I use it all the time. And I love it, and it makes me happy. We take it on every camping trip. It's like the best. I'm so glad I actually purchased these things. Now, the athletic set is an example of something of like, I want to look fancy. I want to have this cute, like matching yoga pant, yoga top type of thing. And just picked it up after work, after like a hard day at work. It was like, I deserve this. This is my treat for this hard day. Instant shot of dopamine. Uh, like, I feel better, done. And then with time, I was like, I don't even know if I like this. I don't even know if this is flattering. I don't know. Like, this is so expensive. And I feel like proud and empowered that I bought something expensive because I couldn't do that before. But that's like where the joy ends. That's where that stopped. It wasn't actually the thing itself. So I ended up returning that, and I'm really glad I did that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I remember too, this shift for you happened very quickly. Once we started talking about like the joy that you get from spending money versus impulse or soothing or like trying to get something different that wasn't actually about the actual thing. I remember the shift being so quick. Like the call after we talked about it, all of a sudden you were
Oh,
just like, I'm so aware of this brings me joy. This doesn't. I got this thing. I know exactly why I got this thing. I'm gonna return it. Like, do you remember how quick
oh,
that was?
it was amazing. Well, I had done a lot of work with food and like eating disorder recovery and things like that. Um, and I realized the parallel instantly between eating and spending. And I think a lot of people call this balance, but very few people do that in a way that's like an intuitive eating style of spending. And realizing what uh like this like weird morality that's tied to spending, I was able to see instantly in my customers, of people who have returned things saying like, I didn't I didn't need to spend so much money on myself. I'm a bad person, how self-indulgent, blah, blah, blah. And recognizing that spending money on something quickly on an impulse buy was just another way of finding dopamine.
Wow. Yep,
Yeah.
it's true. And I'm glad you brought up the like food and eating analogy, because I do a lot of food and eating analogies anyway, because when it comes to money and health and pretty much every area of our life, it's all governed by the same thoughts. They're not actually that separate. It's all very, very similar. So, can you elaborate a little bit more in what felt like strong parallels to you in that world, specific to you and what you were going through?
Absolutely. I think recognizing it was a lot of that mindset work of why do I want to buy this item? Like, am I wanting to buy? Recently, I've been like, I really want a Roomba. I want a Roomba. Like, I don't know why. And I'm like, oh, like I am actually struggling with like, I'm struggling with my cleaning habits, and I have put this thing, like all of that desire into this material item. Um, and with food, it's, do I want this craving? Do I want um to binge or purge or whatever it is, or am I trying to not feel or feel something else that's actually going on in my body? It's
Yeah.
another way of numbing or ignoring what's going on in ourselves. um and especially when you have an item, like an item comes with it the promise of a new life that you'll suddenly magically change. Like, you get this health and fitness tracker, and like, therefore, because you spent $300 on this tracker, you will become the healthy fit person that this is advertised. um yeah, recognizing what the actual motivations were behind my purchases, and not just removing that entirely, but filling that with like self-soothing items. I remember you talked once in my notes about like getting a diet Dr. Pepper or like a diet Coke or something as like a mini impulse buy. I forget. Just like something that's really not consequential, but something that scratches that itch, something that makes you feel good, but you're not spending hundreds of dollars on stuff that doesn't actually make you feel good.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because when it comes to self-soothing or these impulses to like binge, or we're trying to mask a feeling or numb out or whatever it is, all of these things are a part of the human experience. So we're not bad for having these impulses. We're not bad for wanting to self-soothe. We're not bad for like needing to numb out sometimes. But where it crosses over into the unhealthy territory is when we black out and like refuse to acknowledge that that's what we're doing. So at the beginning, you said like so much of this was just about awareness. And it's so true, because once you're aware of the pattern and once you have yourself stay in awareness of like, I'm acknowledging that this is a self-soothing purchase that makes me feel like I can buy these things and I'm trying to like prove to myself that I can afford whatever. And you buy it and you acknowledge it. It's like, okay, I can sit with that feeling and say, yes, I signing off on the fact that I wanted to soothe this way. I'm going to keep the thing. Or you have that awareness and you're like, I want to make a different decision. Let me return it. So it's about the awareness on both ends and saying yes to either decision.
Yes, morally neutral decisions. One doesn't make you a good person, one doesn't make you a bad person. Just need
Mhm.
to look and see what would make you feel closer to the way that you desire yourself to be.
Yeah, and I think that awareness, right? And allowing yourself to feel morally neutral, making these decisions clears the way for some of the stuff that is more self-soothing, masking, numbing to fall away, and allows you to enjoy and soak in the deliciousness of a purchase, like the camping chairs. Like all the work you had did, and the first thing of the athletic set where you were like, nope, acknowledging that wasn't it, let me return it. And then the camping chairs, you were like, this is different. This is not the athletic set. So you knew, right? Because you let yourself feel what a not aligned purchase felt like. So then when something was aligned, you were like, yep, that's what that feels like.
Yeah. Another big factor is time. It created like a notes app on my phone, because an impulse is very similar to a binge. Like, you want it, you need it now. You weren't hungry 2 seconds ago, but now like your life will end if you don't have that peanut butter that's in the cabinet. Like, it's a sudden urgy feeling, and it's all consuming. And the same can happen with purchases. Like, you see the ad for the pair of jeans, and you're like, I need to have this now. Fuck it, I'm gonna do it. Um, and just like taking a pause in the form of I'm going to take an action, and that's writing it in my notes app. And then in a week from now, I'm going to look at this app and say, like, do I really need this? Like, oh, there was one that was stupid for me. I think it was like a goldfish tank that was also a planter, or just like something really silly where it's like, I don't want this at all. Like, okay, goodbye. I'm so glad I didn't waste $30 on that. Like, come on.
Right. And also someone else could have had that on their list and been like, no, this thing has been gnawing at me for 3 weeks. I
Exactly.
want this fucking goldfish planter.
Yes.
I love that. Okay, I want to jump back to when you were talking about your big travel, because during our time, you embarked on this huge
Yeah.
expedition, kind of, right? And you had gigs in the middle, and then things were popping up that you weren't expecting, and you were utilizing your money to help you navigate them. Walk us through this adventure trip.
Oh yeah. And going through my old notes from our old sessions, it goes right along in my bullet journal with like the meticulous plans I'd made for this trip. Of so my fiance and I live in Philadelphia. His parents are from Colorado. His brother lives in Bloomington. So we were going to drive out to Bloomington and camp in West Virginia along the way. And then from Bloomington, we were going to go out to Fort Collins, where his parents live, and camp, I think, in like Missouri, or just like somewhere again halfway in between. And so Brooke and I worked on like, okay, here's the money that I could spend on gas, and like here's all the budgeting. Here's because I was then going, I had 2 gigs in Montana during that time, so I was flying back and forth from Colorado to Bozeman, and yeah, just all over the place. And then eventually we would have to drive back because we were driving with our dog. Um, but along the way, once we got along the way, once we got to Missouri, it was supposed to be like 102 degrees during the day and going down to 90 degrees at night. And we're just like, there's like, no, we're not going to do that. And I was like, oh, I can afford to look up a pet friendly hotel and I can buy a hotel room. Like, we don't need to suffer because this is our plan and camping is cheaper and we already bought the campsite. Like, we can afford to do this. Like, this is why you talk a lot about like the point of saving money is then to spend the money. So I dipped into my like emergency savings in order to do this, but like that felt like the right thing to do. That would have been an emergency. Our dog can't live outside in 100-degree weather. That's money. Whereas before I would have been really nervous to use that of like, does this actually qualify as an emergency? Am I just being lazy? Blah, blah, blah. I'm not being frugal enough. It's like, no, awesome. How exciting that it is that I have the chance to spend this money that I saved on something that was like, we had a great night's sleep. It was awesome.
That's so great. And the whole the thoughts that you went through there were because you had a plan set in place, right? Like, if there was no plan whatsoever and it's like, well, all right, we're just going to keep swiping our cards, see what happens, hopefully we have enough. You went into that trip in power, right? Like in the driver's seat of like, I know what's going to happen. And if something gets derailed, like what happened, like you have this plan set out that then you can look at, you know, your numbers, you know, your money, you worked through the avoidance thing. So then you can make a decision that felt really good and sign off on it, right? It wasn't like, well, fuck it, we just have to now. Like, there's no way, hope we have enough, let's get this hotel, which could have also triggered, like, let's find the cheapest hotel, like the shitty motel on the side of the road, which isn't what you did. And then you did get to have an incredible night's sleep. I'm not a camper, so thinking about camping in 102-degree weather, I'm like, are you kidding me? Of course that's an emergency. But for someone who camps a lot, right? Maybe it wouldn't flag as like the biggest emergency.
Right.
Love that you did that for yourself.
Yeah, us too. It was the best possible choice we could have made, and so cool that we had the chance to like just do that and move on with our lives.
Yeah. And I remember too, during that trip, because you had a couple of gigs and then you also had a couple of like REI paychecks that were coming in, and they were just coming in at wild times. And so we talked a lot about managing not just the fluctuating income, but kind of the randomness and the delay and things like that. Do you remember that
Yes.
piece of it? Talk us through it. Tell everyone what we worked through and the things that you implemented.
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the main reasons for me to sign up for coaching in the first place. It's because, like, all the financial advice I've gotten from my life, from my brother, who's super good with money, but like, it's a 9 to 5 bi-weekly paycheck, which is something I've never experienced whatsoever, at least in like a consistent sense. Um, and so with this, we opened up my first credit card, which was amazing because then I could have expenses come, like, my insurances or whatever have you. I could put them on the card and then know it wouldn't just like sit there indefinitely, like, God, I hope I get another paycheck to pay off this credit card. It's, I know the money is coming in, it'll just be in 2 weeks once the gig is done, but this is due now, so I have a credit card that I can pay that, and then I'll pay off the credit card bill. And I mean, that was a complete game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember you getting your first credit card and how like mind blowing it was. We were like, oh, I can put this expense on this and it can sit for a second while I wait for the paycheck to come in.
It was just made for a freelancer's lifestyle. I can totally see how people, I had to work through a lot of like, do I trust myself? I've always been told that I am too disorganized or whatever have you for owning my own credit card, that I'll just go crazy with it. I won't be able to like have impulse control. Sorry, there's like construction or something happening out the window. I don't know if that's bleeding in, so I apologize.
You're good.
But once I actually had a card, I was like, oh, of course I trust myself with this. Like, I'm not abusing this. This is my token. This is my like golden ticket to freedom in my financial life, because I'm gonna get, and it's not like a small paycheck's coming. It's like I would have a completely dry month and then like $5,000 dropping at the end of the month. Like that. So what are you supposed to go from like zero to, for me, what's like a ton of money? I'm gonna have to manage that in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. And I remember the credit card also giving you some peace of mind during that crazy travel time when like a paycheck was late or you were waiting on this one and this expense is happening and you had to pay this. Like you had this buffer ground, right? This buffer money via the credit card where if something happened, you weren't shit out of luck no matter what. So I remember, even though you didn't actually need the card for a lot of actual things, the peace of mind that it gave you of like, but I have this if I need it, allowed you to navigate that trip a little bit differently than you initially would have.
Oh, totally. It takes you out of this like scarcity mindset of like, oh my gosh, I only have, I budgeted $350 for this trip. If I even think about going over, like, and if anything bad happens, that I am just like screwed. There's nothing I could do. To have that peace of mind of like, yeah, I can handle it. It's my
Yeah.
favorite mantra of yours. It's just like, whatever happens, I can handle it. It'll be okay.
It's the best.
Yeah.
So also when you were talking about that trip, I remember it was also a season of playing within some tighter margins, again, with what the paychecks were looking like and the certain gigs, right? So playing within tighter margins, but also not wanting you to go into like deprivation mode, right? And like eating just beans, like you said earlier. So can you tell us a little bit about what it felt like to be playing in tighter margins for that season while also not dipping into deprivation? What did that feel like for you? What were the thoughts? What were the things we did in that season?
Yeah, we went through and we thought about things that were really important. Like, what if I didn't have, if I wasn't able to do, what would feel like deprivation? And the first thing that came up for me is like, I'm in Fort Collins, there's incredible craft beer. Like, I want to be able to just like go to a couple breweries and have fun and not really worry about my money, versus, like going shopping, not really super necessary here. Prioritizing things like spending time with, my soon to be family and enjoying the outdoors, like free activities, were on a higher priority list. Yeah, going through and identifying like what would actually feel like deprivation and what isn't necessarily as important, what's on your priority list in terms of activity. Um, yeah, like what can go and what can stay, what should stay, and having no judgment about like a brewery. That's stupid, that's frivolous. Like, why would you spend money on that? You don't need to do that. Just like, no, like, this makes me happy, and it's really good here. This is something I'm going to use my limited funds on. And so I can tighten it up in other places that make me feel like I'm empowered of my choices and not like holding in the reins for dear life.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. Like feeling empowered in how you decided to spend your money. I think that's key because I think so often it's like, okay, when I'm getting my money shit together and I'm playing in tight margins, I have to like cut back and I'm mad about it because it feels like this external force is making me cut back all this stuff. But instead, when you focus on, and this is what we did, the priority word, right? Instead of focusing, what can we cut out? It was like, what do you fucking love, right? We are not beer. Let's put
It's
money
fair.
there. Yeah. So we focused on where do you want to put money? And then all the other stuff, we didn't even really have to have conversations of like, what are you going to cut out? It just didn't feel as high priority because you got to get excited about like, oh my God, I can still drink this craft beer that I love and like be able to do this trip and be a freelancer, right? All at the same time. So I think it was an emotional shift too of we just focused on all the shit that you love and made sure that that was a priority.
Right, right. And then it didn't seem like you were cutting a lot out because you're putting something else in. Like you're, yeah.
Exactly. Yes, completely. Okay, so one of the last things I want to talk about is we also had a lot of conversations about how to have money conversations, right? With your partner, with your family. Of course, money is involved in all of that. And so there was a lot of emotional, like family dynamics and things that were at play with your money. Can you speak a little bit on that and what you remember of those conversations?
Yeah, I remember my initial money mindset had a lot to do with this idea of like I'm the artist of the family, right? I'm this the black sheep. My brother is a lawyer and my other brother is a banker, and so I'm the one who's like not good at money, and I'm also the youngest, uh, and therefore things would be just what's the right word? I want to use spoon fed, but I don't think that's correct. Just like a little more molly coddled, I guess. Um, and having the initial conversations about money, like, hey, I'm seeing a money coach, like, I'm going to do things differently now, uh, was initially met with, like, oh, well, you have to do this and you should do that. And, like, this is make sure that you talk about this and this is, and the, it took a lot of like self trust to say like no, I can actually know what I'm doing. Like I am an adult, I'm going to make my own choices. I've made pretty good choices so far to get me where I am. um because when you're in those conversations and like I love my family and they're incredibly supportive of what I do, but it just money is awkward to talk about. Like it's always it comes with so much baggage. um and everyone has, just like everyone has their own food issues, like everyone has their own money issues. To be in the middle of those conversations and have to like continue to ground yourself and like I trust myself, I know what I'm doing, first required me for me to like learn and know what I'm doing, but yeah, there's that cognizance and that awareness of I can have this conversation and you can disagree with me, and that is okay because I trust myself. And what you say right now comes from a place of like your money stuff, and I'm choosing not to have that.
Yes, completely. And you touched on all of the three main things that I remember from navigating this piece of it. The first thing was like the education piece, the knowledge, so that the confidence in the I trust myself energy was founded in actual facts, right? You were like, "Oh, I actually know how bank accounts work. I know what my numbers are. I know how this money thing works and how it functions." So then you could step into the identity of I trust myself. I've got my own system. My life is different. And that means that my money is going to look different. So then you had that I trust myself energy. And then we talked about the conversations that you needed to have and the ones that you could keep precious, right? And keep, I don't, how do I want to say this? It's not like keeping it to yourself and keeping it secret, but you're treating it as special, as sacred. That's the word I want to use, right? Like, what things do you want to keep sacred just for you or you and your partner? And what are the conversations that you do need to have? And then how to navigate those conversations. Is there anything in those three areas that you wanted to comment on?
Let's see. I think, all right, the importance of education. I think there's so much that we could talk about because it's fascinating about like mindset work and like shifting your perspective in this more like holistic way. But I loved that that was always coupled with the concrete of like, so what actually, like, how actually does this work? Like, what knowledge do I need to obtain to be able to then work on the other stuff? Um, Right, and how just like your relationship with your family members is all different. Like the money conversations I have with my partner are completely different than the money conversations I have with my mom. And for me, I especially as I'm navigating a familial change, like I'm engaged, I'm going to be married, like my partner's going to be the number one person for like financial choices, and navigating that shift financially and emotionally was really important. um yeah, it just it signifies like a different, what's the word, like different person, a different, yeah, different shift.
For sure.
Mhm.
So, on the education part, right, and the actual knowledge part, do you remember a couple of those like education, knowledge, understanding pieces where you're like, oh my God, I didn't know that. How cool that I know that now? Do any come to mind?
High yield savings account is the first thing I can think of. Like it's so simple, but the fact that that exists, the fact that you can, I was aware of passive income, and I was like, I want to learn more about this, but uh, the fact that I could have money sitting in an account and I see interest come back at a higher rate, that was amazing. Other, yeah, learning about credit and credit cards, learning about like I've now have a Roth IRA that I didn't know. Like if you would have asked me a year ago what a Roth IRA was, I'd been like, ha, that's funny. Like I have no clue. What is
Tell
that?
us about the Roth IRA. Tell us about investing. Tell us about
Yeah.
retirement.
Oh, I it's a very clear before and after. Like before, if you would have asked me about retirement, like I'm just thankful that I can like not eat beans, right? Like retirement is for normies. It's not for artists. Like retirement is for people who wear suits and ties to work, and I don't fit in that category. Um, but the idea but like of course now I have a Roth IRA. I learned what that was. I learned how it worked. I learned that like what systems work best for me. I use Elvest because it just like I really like the formatting of it, and it's something I can check on, but I don't have to obsess over and watch constantly. It just pulls out of one of my, now there's uh, checking buckets in Ally, which they didn't have while we were together. So it just pulls out from that, which is amazing. Um, so it's automatic and I don't really have to give it attention unless I choose to. And I checked in it this morning. I was like, oh, like there's $1,000 in that account. How did that happen? Like,
That's incredible,
who knew?
Lauren. And when did you open this account?
When did I open this account?
Give us a timestamp.
I think, well, it was last summer because we were
Right.
working
So
together.
less
Yeah,
than a year ago, less than
yeah.
a year ago, and you already have $1,000 put towards your retirement. That's so incredible.
It's stupid. Like it's crazy. Um, that and like again, I am not somebody who makes a ton of money, but I just put a little bit, just like a little bit each month goes into that account, and that's what happens. Like that's how this works.
Right. That's what intentionality does, right? It doesn't have to be grueling and it doesn't have to suck. It's just the intention behind it.
Absolutely.
Tell me now, how does it feel to be someone who has a retirement account?
Oh my God, it feels so
To
much
be one of
better.
the normies now.
Yeah, but like I'm not a normie. I'll never
Right.
be a normie. That's yeah. Not that there's anything wrong with being a normie. Like we love all. However,
And this is something we've talked about too, right? The binary between like us and them, like it's
Yeah.
me and my people who would never have retirement accounts and the people in the suits who do have retirement accounts. We know that binary doesn't exist, but in our heads, like we put ourselves into that place to make ourselves feel better about, right, not having the money things or doing the money things because it's like not for us, right? And then once who you see yourself as part of one of these categories, do something that you initially thought was a part of this other category, it starts to break that binary of like, ooh, we're in that gray area, which everything in life is. Right. Okay. I'm someone like this who does something like that. Cool, cool, cool.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, breaking through that black and white thinking is just so difficult of this like us versus them, artist versus not, good versus bad. Um, but I think there's a fear of like it's less a fear of failure of like what if I'm an artist and I try to do this and it doesn't work out? It's like, well, what if I'm an artist and I do this and it does work? Like what how terrifying is it if I'm like a successful artist who's not hiding behind these tropes of you know, all artists are crazy and manic and they stay up super late at night and they spend all their money, and like what if I had a stable life and also created good art? Like that uh that's terrifying. Like that's the actual fear
Yeah,
uh, of like what it's like fear of success more than fear of failure.
sure. Tell
um
us now about like your art and your craft, right? With all
yeah.
this money stuff. Do you feel like getting your money shit together and being fiscally well ruined your art?
No. Because uh a good art is built on the same self-trust that good money habits are. Right? Like
That's so good, Lauren.
thank you, thank
Yes.
you. I just thought of it now. Um, but it's true. Like the more I get to know myself and the more I get to express who I am, and in order to express who I am, I have to learn who I actually am. And that's something I want to do in my art and in my creativity, whichever way it chooses to express itself. uh that's what we have to do with money. All that we're talking about like numbing and avoiding, like we do that to ourselves as artists. And if anything, like I've had the time to just sit and journal about this shit for the past 2 weeks because I have money. Like it's offered me this freedom that I don't need to feel guilty about. And now I can have the space and time to really practice and dig into what I want to do because of that money. If I'm constantly going for the next, like, I have to take every single gig, I have to just work and work and work because I'm so poor, like, there's no, I think good art requires space and silence. And that's what money allows you to have.
Mm.
Um,
I love that. That's beautiful. And do you feel like with how you manage your money now, like how much time does it take for you? Do you feel like you are a different person when you're managing your money? Do you still feel like a creative when you're handling your money? Tell us about that, the actual management of it.
yeah, money requires creative solutions. Like people who think like
You are dropping just like fire
thank
one-liners.
you, thank you. But it's true. Like we have to be creative people in order to solve the problems in front of us. Like it's not clear cut of and so we get to use our creativity, like this gift that we have, to help us in those avenues of our life. It feels really good when you look at something and you're like, oh, I'm proud of that. I'm excited to see that. This is something that from the beginning, which is truly thanks to you, like we infuse this time with positivity and curiosity, and like checking on my bank accounts is going to be something that makes my body feel good because we've like somatically trained it to be so. And so it does. Um, yeah, definitely makes you a
I
more
love
creative
that.
person.
Incredible. Um, I have just a couple more questions, but I do want to touch on the fact that when we started working together, one of your goals was to get a laptop because you did not have a laptop and you would take all of your coaching calls on your phone.
I
And
thought,
whenever we would like look up bank accounts, you'd be like, hold on, pausing the Zoom and like do the bank accounts.
yes.
And then I got a Voxer message from you in all caps. I got a laptop. I used my buckets. Tell us about the laptop purchase.
It was my first completed bucket. It's so beautiful to have, like, because with your buckets on Ally, you set a goal. And I mean, it was a cheap laptop. It was like a $300 HP laptop I bought off of Amazon. But I didn't have one. I thought I was someone who couldn't afford a laptop. And I, like, didn't, again, that, like, normie culture. I don't work a desk job. I don't need a laptop. I can answer my emails on my phone, blah, blah, blah. It made life so difficult. um, Right, but the joy of like that going back to intentional spending, like I created a bucket. I want this laptop. Over time, just like a little bit, just as like this old knowledge of save a little bit of each paycheck. But how cool it was for me to see, like I have to have the carrot in front of my face in order for me to remember that there's a carrot there at all. Of like I could
Mm.
put the money into the bucket and then I see the bucket grow and then the bucket is full. Celebrate, hooray. Now I have a laptop. Like, what a cool process.
How fun. How fun. So, two last questions for you. One is, are there any like wins or aha moments that you had during coaching or even after coaching, like the aftermath of the coaching that
Yeah.
we haven't talked about yet that you want to share?
Um, Let me think, because I think it's
You're living in a new place. This is what just came
right.
to my mind, right?
Oh,
You
yeah.
have a new home.
I'm in a home. Like I'm in a house. Um, right, and deconstructing thoughts about because when I moved to this house, it's like, what does it mean if I live in the suburbs and I have a house? Am I still an artist? Am I still like it's the same tired argument. Like, no, I want a safe place to land that's quiet and filled with nature so I can go out and do the crazy travel and do the crazy thing, like somewhere to come home to. Um, so yeah, the biggest aha, like the thing that I use almost every day is the phrase I can handle it. Like
Mm.
I love it so much. In looking at, there's a couple of times when I was really in the weeds and I was embarrassed to come to you to be like, Brooke, like I don't know if I'm gonna be able to pay rent. Like, what do I do with this? Um, you would just say like, okay, you can't pay rent. Now what? What do you do? Like, it's the first of the month, you have to pay rent. The money's not there. How are you gonna handle it? I'm like, oh, I'd probably talk to my fiance and we'd work something out and maybe one day I'll have a credit card and can put some expenses on there. Just like there was all these again creative solutions I didn't know existed. And that when I took myself there mentally, any anxiety about or like shame about like, oh my God, I can't pay my rent, like what would actually happen? In no scenario was it which comes with incredible privilege of like, I'm not gonna lose my house. Or if I lost my house, I'd be okay. Like you can keep going down and at the end of each road saying, oh, I will be okay. I think that is one of the biggest moments for me of just I got this. I'll be okay no matter what happens. All of this anxiety and fear of this thing that could happen may happen. So now what?
Yeah. I love that you brought that up and that you still use that tool every day. It is one of the most powerful tools of like following the trail of fear. Like for you was one of them was, what if I can't pay rent? What if I can't pay rent? Right. We had some like residual trauma from like
Yeah.
seeing the negatives in the bank accounts. Right. And so following that down, putting you back into the powerful decision maker position of like, okay, right, like here's the situation. If I can't pay rent, if the money is not in the bank on the first, what are all of my options? And then you get to feel more powerful and it diffuses the fear of like, yeah, but even in the face of that, I would do this, this, and this. And then if that never happened, right? You weren't ever like not able to pay rent. And I think that's also a testament to the fact that you knew what you would do if that had happened. So it also gives you the peace of mind too for this thing that probably will never happen. And then if it does, you don't go into panic mode because you've already mapped it out.
Yeah, totally. And
That's so good.
as you're saying this, I'm realizing like, oh, the biggest thing is like money isn't obscure and unreachable and something that only the very, very privileged can and should learn about. Like it's uh literacy, financial literacy, like knowing what's going on has just it's completely changed my life. Like
Mm.
knowing what I can do with my money. Yeah. That's I mean that's like the obvious takeaway, which is why it didn't come up first, but like
Yeah.
that's the biggest tool is this like education.
I love it. So the final question, well, two more questions. Final question about you that I want to ask is when you think forward, like goals, future lifestyle, right? Looking ahead with the tools and stuff that you have now, like in your money toolkit, what are you looking forward at? Right? You've just now transitioned into full-time freelancing. Tell us.
Yeah, um I want to continue, like, I want to continue full-time freelancing, which also means putting more time and effort and potentially money into like me as a business of like updating my website that I've been telling myself I'm going to do forever and I've never actually done. Like putting myself out there for different gigs that I didn't think I could get before. I see that career-wise, like lifestyle-wise. I totally feel confident that I'll be able to buy a new car eventually. Not right now. Like we're saving, but um and then the biggest thing is travel. Like I love obviously these like crazy elaborate travel plans. And I want to continue to be able to do that. I love driving out west. I want to climb. I want to learn how to climb real rocks. I want to, yeah, like just stuff like that where I didn't think that would be an option. Or it's again a binary of like I will work and then I could take like a week off from work and I could do this one thing and this one like off time and then the switch turns back on and then like the rest of life begins. It's
Mm.
I think the biggest thing is this flexibility that I've built my life around as a freelancer. It's like I want to keep that forever. I want to be able to go up and travel and like do what I want, like do what makes me happy for a while and have that be um yeah, have that be okay and not put me because before I would try to do that and just like live with the consequences of I was like, well, I won't be able to eat, but like, hey, at least I went camping in Montana. Like that's not um and now it's like, oh, I can maybe eat and camp.
Eat and camp. Wow.
Yeah, among the fire one-liners, I'd put that in.
What a life. Eating and camping. That's what you get in money coaching.
Yeah. No, I just
Yeah.
but honestly, of just uh getting having the flexibility and freedom, I think is the biggest thing.
Yeah, I love that. So, final question. If someone asked you about money coaching, if they were interested in it and they were asking you for your thoughts, what would you tell them?
Honestly, it was like one of the best choices I've ever made with my life. I was terrified to do it because I don't make a lot of money. I thought money coaching is something for like only like reserved for this upper echelon of wealth that like people who have a lot of money then can spend a lot of money and then they can make even more money and I was excluded from that. It was one of the best investments I ever made. I would say that right off the bat of like
Yeah.
just like if you can do it, it will give back to you tenfold.
Mm. And how brave and courageous a decision you made, right? In that time of questioning that binary, right? Of, oh, but what if this is for me? And then allowing yourself to say yes to it. And then during our time together, it was so fantastic watching you implement week after week after week and learn and do and really dive into the process because that's a huge part of why you saw the results that you did, right? Because you went all in. You were like, I'm a yes and I'm a hard yes. It was so incredible.
Well, thank you.
And
Well, I'm like interjecting because there was definitely a point midway through where I was like, I'm not doing like I'm failing at this. Like I'm not doing enough. I'm wasting my money because I'm not like doing my weekly money check-ins and I'm not doing my homework and like what does that mean?
I remember us voxering about that. I remember sending you a voice memo about that specifically after you had a call where you were very frustrated at how you were showing up. Can you elaborate on that? Like what happened then? What was the shift? Like what clocked you back into the container in the way you wanted to be in it? Or what were the
Yeah, I mean,
thoughts?
I felt like a kid who like didn't practice for their piano lesson and would go to piano lessons week after week and be like, oh, like here's the hour where I learned how to play the piano and nothing else happens outside. Like, it was really frustrating and I was really disappointed in myself. But you kept saying like there's no way to fail. There's literally no way to fail, which is the first time I've really heard anyone say something like that. Except for again the realm of intuitive eating, which is always like kind of my click in to this. There's no such thing as perfect spending. There's no such thing as perfect eating. And realizing that uh, there were going to be times like this, and that still meant that I was on track. Like, and that has proven to be true post coaching of, yeah, there's like sometimes I go a little too long without like looking at my numbers, or like I'll flop the other way, and sometimes I'll check my bank account every day. Like sometimes I do it wrong. And that was a really important lesson to learn in coaching of like, so yeah, sometimes I'll do it wrong or sometimes I won't do it at all. And that's fine.
And that's actually normal and
Yeah.
expected because it's
Yes.
human. And how we craft the systems and do money, it allows, it buffers for that, for the humanness. Like you literally cannot fuck it up because the systems don't allow you to. And also, right, like in your thoughts, there, it's all part of it. Like when you came to me and you were like, I didn't do my homework, I'm like, yeah, cool, right? Like I expected this.
Yeah, which was so shocking and so lovely. And then like a week later, yeah, I did contact a CPA and like I got my taxes done in September or whenever it was. Like I
Right.
eventually did the thing.
It was when you released, I remember you like released the weight of it, like it clicked for you of like, oh my God, I can't fuck it up. I didn't do anything wrong. And once the weight was released, all of a sudden you voxered me and you were like, I got this CPA. They're not perfect, but they're going to get my taxes done for this year. Boom, done.
Totally. As soon as it removed itself from this like unending shame of like, oh my God, I forgot again. I can't think of anything. My brain doesn't work. I remember writing in my journal of like, oh, my brain doesn't work right. Like I can't remember to do anything. And you were like, no, like your brain is fine. Work with your brain. Just do the thing. And as soon as it's removed from all that judgment and shame, at the end of it, there's just an easy task to complete.
Yeah. So for anyone who's listening to this that feels like they're not type A enough, they're not organized enough, they're too creative, they're too scatterbrained, all of these things that you said to me at some point inside of our container, right? All of you who are listening who feel that way, like you can't fuck it up. You literally will not be able to do this perfectly. So the sooner you release that, the sooner shit can happen.
Total. And it's, if I can add, like it's focusing on feelings, which is what we do as artists. Like, how does this like how does this purchase feel? How does this spending feel? You know, whatever it is. Like, it's not, for me, I thought I was bad at numbers, so I didn't want to think about numbers. But it's not. It's all about getting in touch with human emotion, which again, like it just goes along with artistry so beautifully.
Right. It's about the numbers. How do the numbers make you feel? Do you want to feel those feelings? Do you want the numbers to shift? Right. How is it all of it? Right. It all comes back to feelings. I love that you brought that up. Feelings first, money management. It's the name of the game.
It's pretty cool stuff.
Yeah. Lauren, thank you so, so much for joining me on the podcast today. I think this conversation was incredible, especially for creatives and artists who have so many of the same thoughts that you brought to this interview today and shared. For those of you listening, like you are not alone. Any last things you wanted to share before we hop off, Lauren?
Not that I can think of. Thank you. This was awesome. I'm really so happy to just like talk with you again and like live in this world for a little bit, because it's just like a good little refresh. It's great.
I love to hear that. All right. Thank you again, Lauren.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks so much for tuning in. Come join me on Instagram for more on how to build a simple, sexy relationship with your money. My Instagram handle is @NotStarvingArtists. And if you want to dive deeper with me, head to the show notes to learn more about one-on-one coaching. If you love this episode, subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a friend that you want to get rich with.